Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And we have got a great show for you. Coming up in our second hour, we have Dan Pilla, tax expert, longtime friend of Point of View, who's been on for decades, especially around tax time. April 15th is around the corner, and the tax man's coming. So at that hour, in the second hour, we'll be talking to Dan about tax issues you might be facing, and I'll open the phones early so you can get in to ask him your questions if you still have some questions about taxes. But in this hour, I'm excited about this because in this hour, we welcome Dr. Mitri Raheb. He is the founder and president of Dar al-Kalima University College of Arts and Culture in Bethlehem. Dr. Raheb is a co-founder of Bright Stars of Bethlehem, a not-for-profit 501c3 organization in the U.S. He's the most widely published Palestinian theologian, the author and editor of 40 books. His books and numerous articles have been translated into 11 languages. Dr. Raheb served as the senior pastor of the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem from June 1987 to May 2017, and as president of the Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land from 2011 to 2016. He received an honorary doctorate from Concordia University in Chicago in 2003, and he holds a doctorate in theology from the Phillips University at Marburg, Germany. Dr. Raheb, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for hosting me.
Well, I was very interested in this because of, you know, we here in the States, we hear about Palestinians in the U.S. It is often in a negative context, focusing on either the conflicts with Israel or with their embrace of terrorism and so forth. So please get us started by giving us some context about Palestine. Who are the Palestinians, the difference between Gaza and the West Bank, and how that relates to you?
Yeah. First of all, when you think of Palestine, actually the first thing that should come to mind is the Bible. Because as you know, the Bible did not originate in the Bible Belt, but actually originated in Palestine, right?
Yes.
So the story and history of salvation took place there. And Palestinian Christians are actually the descendants of the first Christian communities. You know, often when I'm traveling here throughout the United States, like now, many churches, they ask me, tell us, when did your family convert to Christianity? Assuming maybe that we used to be heathens or Muslim who were converted to Christianity by some missionaries from the Midwest or so. But remember, it all started there. So, in fact, I was born across the street from where Jesus was born. And so I like always to tell our friends here, you know, most probably, one of my grandmas used to babysit for Jesus. So, you know, we have that long history with Jesus. My family, at least we can trace it back, to the 4th century, maybe when they became Christians. So, yeah, unfortunately today only 1.7% of the population are Christians, because many Christians have immigrated in the last 100 years due to all the political problems and economic problems that we are facing. So Bethlehem is in the West Bank, as you know, but our university has also a satellite program in Gaza that is also for us very important. Now, who are the Palestinians? The Palestinians are the descendants of all the nations who lived in Palestine, including Canaanites, Jewish, Greek, Roman, Arabs. I mean, the accumulation of all of these nations are what the Palestinians are today.
You know, when you wrote a book titled I'm a Palestinian Christian. And it's an interesting title, because here in the United States, if I'm traveling, I don't say I'm a United States Christian or I'm a Texas Christian, but you do say I'm a Palestinian Christian. So tell us what you mean. What are you conveying when you say that?
Yeah, actually, because I think in the West especially, people think that being Palestinian and being Christians are like contradictory in itself and are at odds. But as I made the point, Christianity really started in Palestine. And so I wanted, to make the point for people to understand that, I mean, Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. Mm-hmm. But again, even this sounds like a contradiction in itself, because today, when we hear Jew and Palestinian, we think they are at odds. But, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have been always, for the last, 1,400 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years, part of the history of Palestine.
So in Palestine, as we refer to it today, we're often referring to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So make the distinction there between Israel, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and Palestine specifically.
Yeah, I mean, there is, first of all, historic Palestine. Historic Palestine covers the whole area from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River. So that is historic Palestine. But today, when we speak about Palestine, it's basically the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. This is according also to the U.S. official policy. They talk about the occupied territories, or Palestine, that covers these three areas: the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza.
Okay, we're talking right now to Dr. Raheb, Dr. Mitri Raheb, and he is from Palestine and Bethlehem, and has a long experience in that. Was born and raised in that area. And when we come back, Doctor, I'd like to ask you the question about the number of Christians and Arabs. I believe the majority of a large segment of the Arab population is Christian in that area. But I'd like to get your thoughts on that and the conflicts between Christians and Arabs in that area, as well as Israelis. So we're talking to Dr. Mitri Raheb. He is from Bethlehem. I'm going to open it up a little bit for your questions if you'd like to reach out to him. We have more information about him on pointofview.net. You can go there and find out. You can see his biography. There's ways to reach out to his organization and so forth and find out more about him. And so when we come back, we want to find out more about this issue of Palestinian Christians and what that means. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Kevin Williamson recently asked a good question. Are we at war? At first glance, the answer seems simple. The U.S. is not at war with Russia. We haven't declared war on Russia, even if we are indirectly involved in providing military hardware. But consider the fact that few Americans thought we were at war with radical Islam until the attack on 9/11. These radical Muslim leaders were at war with us, even as our leaders in the country dismiss some of the earlier attacks on our military. Kevin Williamson argues that the United States is a belligerent if Vladimir Putin says the United States is a belligerent. That is a sobering thought. Putin can make up a pretext to attack the U.S. or NATO and justify whatever action he feels is necessary. As I mentioned in a previous commentary, his next attack might be a cyber attack. The Biden administration apparently backed down from sending MiG-29 fighter jets from Poland to Ukraine because they would first be sent to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. They feared this might look like the U.S. and NATO were carrying out a military operation against Russian forces in Ukraine. Kevin Williamson said the MiG fiasco underlined the Biden administration's predictable fecklessness and disorganization. America needed a Keystone pipeline, but instead we got the Keystone Cops. The administration also hopes that fighting will stay in Ukraine, but it will only stay there if Putin believes that it is in his interest to keep it there and might move his troops to other countries rather than stay tied down in a quagmire in Ukraine. We may not think we're at war with Russia, but Vladimir Putin may not see it that way. We should be prepared. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and joining me by phone is Dr. Mitri Raheb. He is the founder and president of Dar al-Khalima University College of Arts and Culture in Bethlehem, and for 30 years he was the senior pastor of the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, and we're talking about Palestinian Christians. So Dr. Raheb, give us a breakdown of some of the numbers there. What is the Christian population look like there in Palestine?
Yeah. As I said, unfortunately, the numbers of Christians in that region are dwindling because of the political and economic realities. Right now, there are 1.7% of the people in the West Bank are Christians, including myself. Inside Israel, 1.3% of the populations are Christians. And in Gaza, unfortunately, there are less than 800 Christians left, which means we know that within this generation, Christianity will cease to exist in Gaza. And this is a shame because Gaza used to be an important mission hub in Palestine, historically speaking.
Can you give us...
Gaza is... Yeah.
Can you give us some distinction of why the difference between Gaza and the West Bank?
Because, though, both entities belong to Palestine, there is a division, a geographic division, first of all. And secondly, in Gaza, we have Hamas ruling, and in the West Bank, we have Fatah ruling. And so this is the distinction. And secondly, because, the people the Christians in Gaza are living basically in an open-air prison controlled by Israel. They cannot even leave Gaza. Nobody can go into Gaza. And so their situation is really very, very difficult. And especially young people, if they have a chance to leave, they leave and they don't come back.
Are the Christians persecuted by Muslims in Gaza and the West Bank?
No, we cannot talk of persecution. Actually, I just published a book September last year at Baylor University Press called The Politics of Persecution, Middle Eastern Christians and an Age of Empire. And I really make there the point that, this talk about Christians being persecuted by Muslims is a perception rather than an actual description. Because, in fact, if you look, Christians continue to play a major role in Palestine today, politically speaking, economically speaking, etc. In a study we did, which people can actually download from our website, darulkalima.edu.ps, we found out that there are 296 Christian organizations working in Palestine, in the West Bank and in Gaza, including East Jerusalem. They are the third largest employer in Palestine, after the government, which is the largest employer. Then comes next the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, that is working in the refugee camps. And then comes actually the Christian organizations. Believe it or not, they employ around 10,000 people. I mean, we talk about 50,000 Christians altogether. They employ 10,000 people. They inject around $500 million a year in the Palestinian economy. If we take Bethlehem as an example, where I live, in Bethlehem there are 4 universities and colleges. 3 out of the 4 are Christian organizations and universities. You have Bethlehem University, which is Catholic. You have Darul Kalima University, that is ours, a Christian university. And you have Bethlehem Bible College. If we take Jerusalem, East Jerusalem as an example, in East Jerusalem, there are 6 hospitals. 4 out of the 6 hospitals are Christian hospitals. So for us, actually, as Palestinian Christians, it is vital to continue the ministry of preaching, teaching, and healing that Jesus himself started in that region 2,000 years ago. Because we don't want the Holy Land to become something like a Christian theme park, where you have all of these ancient and old churches and shrines, but no living and witnessing community. So for us, really, and this is an invitation to our listeners. I know many evangelical Christians in this country, they go and visit the Holy Land. And often they go there without really connecting with the local Palestinian Christian people. They run from one place to the other. I always say they run where Jesus walked. And they miss really on the Christian presence today. And I always tell them, Jesus is not there. He is not in the ruins. He is risen. And if he is risen, then he is to be found among his people. And so I invite actually our evangelical sisters and brothers in this country, when they visit the Holy Land, when they go to Bethlehem, to come and worship with the Christians there. They will not forget this experience.
I believe you're right about that. You're associated with the Lutheran Church. What do denominations look like there in the Holy Land?
Yeah, actually, if we look at the breakdown of the denominations, we can say more or less that 40% of the Palestinian Christians are Orthodox Christians. These are Greek Orthodox mainly. 40% are Catholics. 10% are Oriental Orthodox. These are Copts, Syriac, Armenian. And the last 10% are the Protestants. And if we look at the Protestants, we can distinguish between three groups. We have Lutherans, we have Anglicans, and we have, independent free churches like Alliance, like Church of God, Nazarene, etc. So this is the breakdown of the Christian community.
Are any of those growing faster than others? I mean, you didn't mention Baptists in there. I don't know if they're there, but are any of the denominations sort of really growing?
No, definitely. Baptists are also part of the Protestant community.
I see.
Definitely. There are several Baptist churches there. In Bethlehem, for example, there are 2 Baptist churches. Actually, churches are not growing per se. It is for us actually keeping the Christians there is really important. But there is a slight growth. But the ministries are growing. For example, our ministry right now is the fastest growing Christian ministry in Palestine, and this is now we started 25 years ago, believe it or not. Very small. We had just one room, 8 chairs from the 50s, one desk from the 60s, $327. We didn't have a land to build on the university. We didn't have a campus. We didn't have students, nothing. And within these 25 years, actually, it was a miracle that we have now really the first and only, if you want, Protestant university in the whole of Palestine. And the numbers of students are growing every year. 80% of our student body are Muslims, 20% are Christians. And it is one of the most exciting ministries that are there. So I hope your listener, next time they come, they are welcome to come and visit us. And we focus on arts and culture because we wanted to have a niche that we will really invest in, that will have an important influence on the whole region. And so imagine if all the future filmmakers and musicians and actors and script writers and designers are actually graduates of this university. That is our vision.
Amazing.
I wanted to come back to your question.
Dr. Raheb, hold that for a thought. Hold that thought for a minute. We're going to take a break, and then we'll come back in just a minute. So stay with us. We're talking with Dr. Mitri Raheb, the most widely published Palestinian theologian. Stay with us. We'll be right back on Point of View.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View radio talk show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and my guest by phone is Dr. Mitri Raheb. He is the founder and president of the Dar al-Khelima University College of Arts and Culture in Bethlehem, and for 30 years he was the senior pastor of the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. And so we're talking about issues facing Palestinian Christians. And Dr. Raheb, I had to interrupt you for the break we were coming to, but go ahead and finish that thought.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to come back to your remarks before about Arabs in that region. And, we are Palestinian, but we are Arabs and we are Christians because Arabic is our culture, our language. So if you come to our church in Bethlehem, we worship in Arabic. And guess what? What do you think? When was the gospel first preached in Arabic? People think maybe 19th century or so. But if you read Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit came on the disciples gathered in Jerusalem, and they started talking in tongues, guess which language was mentioned there as last language? Arabic. So the gospel actually was preached in Arabic 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem on Pentecost. And Arab Christianity actually is older than Islam. People, again, this is the misperception, people believing that Arab equals Muslim, but not all Arabs are Muslims because there are also Arab Christians. And not all Muslims are Arabs. The largest Muslim country in the world today is Indonesia. It's not Egypt, not Saudi Arabia. And so Arab Christianity has been part of that region for centuries. And for us, it is really important that the good news will continue to be preached in this language that was heard already on Pentecost.
It's a good point. You live in the West Bank. How much freedom do you feel you have in the West Bank? Are you free to say what you believe? Are you free to preach Christ? Or are there other issues that sort of keep you restrained?
No, actually, we have full freedom to preach Christ. All our services are broadcasted live on Facebook, and not only our church. Today, all churches, this digital age we are living in, especially after the pandemic, most of the churches in our region actually started doing, virtual worship. And so people can access it. We have the official Palestinian TV every Sunday broadcast live the service from one of the Christian churches, so that everyone in Palestine can watch and actually, worship with the Christians. In the newspaper, we have regularly columns that we write on. And we have, in fact, as a university, we have also Darul Kalma University Press. We publish books in Arabic and English, and they are distributed people can get it everywhere. So in Palestine, actually, we worked hard also in the last few years to recognize the Baptist churches and the Alliance, etc. They were not recognized in Palestine until recently, but since 2 years, they are now fully recognized. We are still working in Israel. Unfortunately, the Baptist church and the independent churches are not there recognized. So you see, actually, the situation of most of the churches in the West Bank is better than that of Israel.
That comment that you made actually brought up another question, which I wanted to ask. Here in the States, there's a sort of, especially among evangelicals, there's a sort of a sense that if Israel is doing something, these are the Jews, they're the historic people of God. If they're doing it, it's right. So if the Jews do something, it's right against the Palestine. We sort of take the Jewish side as opposed to the Palestinian. You're there in Palestine. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that the problem is that, many of the evangelicals, not all of them, they somehow mix between the biblical Israel and the states of Israel today. These are two different things which should not be actually mixed. This is one. Secondly, why ignore, the Palestinian Christians that have been faithful to the gospel for the last 2,000 years? Why not listen to their perspectives? Especially that they are not the one in power, It is so important, really, to connect and to listen to the voices of the Christian community in that country. Third, one has to distinguish between the Jewish people as Jewish people and the state of Israel as state, because, states everywhere are not there to be worshipped. I mean, the Old Testament, the New Testament tell us to be, critical of state structures, because, these are people, they are after, their political interests, not necessarily, the interest of God. I mean, you remember in the Old Testament, the prophets were warning, do you want to have a king like all others? I will give you, but then that will be your problem. Remember that story? Mm-hmm. So the Bible itself is critical, actually, of any state structure, and so we have really to listen to the people, to the Christians, I think there, but also to Jews and Muslims who really want peace in that region, because there are those as well.
If you'd like to contact us and talk to Dr. Raheb, our number is 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. Give us a call, and we'll see if we can take your call. Dr. Raheb, you wrote a book called The Bible Through Palestinian Eyes. Of your many books, several of these caught my attention, and that was one of them. What do you mean? What is the Bible through Palestinian eyes?
Yeah, being a pastor in a Palestinian church for 30 years, every Sunday I had to climb on the pulpit and preach. And, in the morning before I do that, every day I read the newspaper, and every day I read the Bible. Suddenly I started actually seeing that our situation in Palestine is very much like the situation of the Israelites in the Old Testament. They were living under occupation, remember, Assyrian Empire, then the Babylonians, then the Persians, the Greek, the Romans. Jesus himself was born under occupation and lived his entire life under occupation. This is what I experienced also myself. And I started to connecting the dots and understood actually the Bible in new light. It was as if the Bible became fresh, as if the Bible was talking directly to me in that situation. And this is really what I wanted to share with the world, because it's a very interesting perspective. To understand what the cross in that context mean, the suffering of Jesus and the redemption, the resurrection, what really it means when Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it abundantly, in that very difficult context. So these are some of the stories really I share in this book, and I would say this is one of my really best books I have written so far.
Well, you have another book which caught my attention, because in the United States, Christians have a certain fondness in their heart for Bethlehem, and yet you published a book called Bethlehem Besieged. We only have about a minute left in this segment, but get us started. What did you mean by Bethlehem Besieged?
I wrote this book in 2002, when Bethlehem was besieged by the Israeli troops, when Israeli tanks enter into Bethlehem, like what you see today in the Ukraine. This is what we experienced actually ourselves, 2002, and I was stuck there for 40 days under curfew, like you see now in the Ukraine. And I shared these stories that I witnessed during this time in this book. These are 15 stories of hope in times of trouble. It is like if a Christian right now in the Ukraine would write...
Dr. Raheb, hold that thought for a second. We've got to take a break. We'll be back with Dr. Raheb in just a minute.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we're back with our final segment with Dr. Mitri Raheb, a Palestinian theologian and Christian. And Dr. Raheb, I had to cut you off for that break, but we were talking about your book, Bethlehem Besieged. Now, go ahead and finish those thoughts.
Yeah, as I said, I wrote it really when Bethlehem was besieged in 2002 by Israeli troops. I was stuck there 40 days under curfew 24/7. And in this book, I wrote the stories I experienced, how Israeli troops enter into our compound. They detained me. These were the most scary moments in my life. But still, these are stories of hope in times of trouble. And I think for people who's, now all our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Ukraine, I think this is what maybe people in the Ukraine are experiencing right now. So these are my, I would say for our listeners, if they would like to hear more about this, they could really look up Bright Stars of Bethlehem, which is our 501c3 organization here in the States that raise awareness and support for our ministry. And on weekly basis, we have updates. So they really can hear some of the stories of hope that comes out of Palestine. And I think this is, I'm so glad for this opportunity to be with you today, because I think this is a perspective you very seldom hear. in this country and maybe on the radio. And so I'm grateful that people can really connect with those Christians that live in Palestine, that have been there for the last 2,000 years and were ignored often by their sisters and brothers in this country.
I think your assessment is correct. And for our listeners, on pointofview.net, we have information about Dr. Raheb and his Twitter handle, Facebook, his website, so you can go and find out more, reach out to him there if you want to. So, Dr. Raheb, the conflict that is going on in Israel now, what are the obstacles to peace? We may never come to peace, but tell us, what are the obstacles to peace, and what do you think needs to happen to at least, if not achieve peace, at least scale down the tensions that are there?
I think for peace we need compromises, because there are today in historic Palestine, between the Mediterranean and the River Jordan, 6.5 million Jewish people and 6.5 million Palestinian people. Two groups, actually, same size. But the one group, in this case the Israeli, they control around 90% of the land. And Palestinians have no control of land resources, and they have actually neither their own recognized state yet, nor their freedom. And it is clear that it is impossible on the long run for one group to control the lives of another group. We really need so that every people have their freedom. Now again, coming back to the Ukraine, if you look at the Ukraine, who are really, they want their freedom. This is what we as Palestinians actually need. We need our freedom. We cannot actually be controlled by others. If you come to Bethlehem today, if I want to go to Jerusalem, which is 5 miles away, I need a permit from Israel just to visit Jerusalem, to go to pray at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, to go to our church headquarters. This is not a concept that is sustainable. And especially, Jews went through difficult times during their history, and they should understand actually, that they cannot control other people forever. At the end of the day, we need both people to live in peace, in dignity, either in two states that have good relations, or in one state where every person has a vote. So what we really, when people in this country ask me, what do you need as Palestinians? All what we need is for the American Constitution to be implemented in Palestine. Freedom, democracy, rights, the right, human rights, the right to proclaim the gospel, freedom of religion. These issues are very important for peace to be there in that region.
Take a few minutes to talk about your organizations and how people can reach out to you, find you, help, and so forth.
Yeah, in the States here, our organization is called Bright Stars of Bethlehem, which is a 501c3 based in Illinois right now. But we have chapters throughout the country. And the idea is really to raise awareness and support for our mission in Palestine, and to bring groups there to come and visit us, because, there isn't anything more transformative than going there, seeing with your own eyes not only what God did 2,000 years ago in that country, but what God is doing here and now and today in that country through his people. And in Bethlehem, our ministry, really, as I said, it's the first and only university that focus on arts and culture. It's a Christian university, you were talking here, I think your colleague in one of the segments was talking about how to reach the digital age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we thought that if we want to reach the digital age, there isn't anything better than, arts and culture. So what we teach is film. Actually, I encourage the listeners to look at one of the films that students also worked on. It's called The Present, and it is available on Netflix. It tells the story of a father and his daughter who wanted to cross over to Jerusalem from Bethlehem to buy a present for the mother. And you can see, these are kids, 18, 20, 22 years old, who work together with the senior producer and senior director on this film that was even nominated for the Academy Award. So it's really this digital age that we want to reach through new ways. Music, what is worship without music, right? It would be boring. And music, the way to praise God. So we need to train the next generation of musicians who really can write songs and praise God and change the culture in that region. This is our mission there.
Well, Dr. Raheb, thank you so much for joining us. It's been very informative, and I hope some of our listeners will reach out to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matthews. It's a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to be able to welcome you next year in Bethlehem.
I hope so, too. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we are welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Well, the tax man cometh. April 15 is around the corner, and when we come back in our next hour, we'll be talking to longtime Point of View friend Dan Pilla to be talking about the taxes that are coming up. There are things that are happening at the IRS, and there's also things that are changing in the tax code. So if you have your questions, I'll open the phone lines early so you can reach out to Dan Pilla. So stay with us. We'll be back on Point of View in a minute.
How has Point of View shaped your point of view? For the last half-century, Point of View has brought light to the culture thanks to the partnership of listeners and supporters like you. That's right, it's been 50 years. To celebrate our 50-year anniversary, Point of View wants to hear from you. Has Point of View ever inspired you to take action? Do you feel your faith and Christian worldview have been strengthened by the program? If so, share your story with us. Email it to story@pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Point of View would be nothing without you. You are Point of View's legacy. Don't let that legacy be forgotten. Share your story today. Tell the next generation how Point of View impacted your life. Your testimony could even be featured on the program. Again, share it to story@pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Story@pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And we switch gears this hour as we turn to tax issues. So our guest for this hour is Dan Pilla, longtime friend of Point of View. He's been doing this for more than 30 years on Point of View. He's one of the nation's leader in taxpayer rights defense and IRS abuse prevention and cure. He's the author of 14 books, dozens of articles, and so forth. He's been on a number of major television programs talking about tax issues. He was a member of the editorial board of the Roadmap to Tax Reform Project, which drove the Bush administration's tax reform agenda. Dan is admitted to practice before the United States Tax Court and is enrolled to practice before the IRS. He's also the executive director of the Tax Freedom Institute, a national association of tax professionals. Dan, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Merrill. Thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, except the tax man cometh here in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, he never really goes away, Merrill.
He never really goes away.
He kind of shows up at the door once a year for your tax return, but he never really goes away. And especially for the people that have tax problems, the IRS is in their face all the time.
The IRS is in their face, but not in quite the way it used to be, because the IRS is having a number of issues, and you write about this in a recent issue you have on National Review. So let's start out by talking about some of the problems that our listeners are going to be facing if they're trying to work with the IRS. So the phone calls to the agency, a lot of places right now, you used to be able to call and you'd get somebody. You sometimes have waiting times, but the IRS is in a mess on these phone calls, isn't it?
Yeah, they're in a horrible mess, Maryland, and they've never been good about the phone calls. The IRS historically has about 100 million calls a year that go into the Internal Revenue Service for one reason or another. People looking for help with their tax preparation, or they got questions, or they got a tax problem, like I mentioned before. They want to have talk to somebody about getting some kind of resolution. So there's all kinds of different reasons people call in. But in 2021, last calendar year, the number of calls into the Internal Revenue Service almost tripled, from 100 million calls to over 282 million phone calls into the IRS. And that's, by any measure, Merrill, that's an explosion of phone calls. And it's easy to understand why the IRS's capacity to answer those calls has dropped considerably over that same period of time. Barely 11%, just over 11% of the people that call into the IRS get their call answered. Never mind get the help they need, just get somebody else on the other end of the phone to answer the call. It's pretty bad.
Why do you think the increase in call? Why such a sharp increase?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the answer is because of all the changes to the tax code that have occurred as a result of these COVID law changes. We saw literally a blizzard of tax law changes beginning March of 2020. In March of 2020, as you'll recall, it was the CARES Act that was passed, this massive piece of legislation that provided tax benefits, all kinds of different benefits for folks as a result of the coronavirus. And that blizzard of changes continued throughout 2020 into 2021 and throughout 2021 as well. And so it's just the Paycheck Protection Program alone, Merrill, that one program that was designed to benefit small businesses, that law was changed at least three times in less than a year, and there were at least 3 administrative regulatory changes by the Small Business Administration during that same period of time. So we got 6 different changes to the law during a less than 1 year period of time, and it threw people into a tizzy. And so they're going to call the IRS to try to get help. Well, guess what? That's the exact wrong place to call these days, because you're just not likely to get through to get any answers.
And you talk about the level of service, LOS. That's apparently a term of art here. What is the level of service, and why is the IRS not doing a good job with that?
Yeah, the level of service is their capacity to answer the incoming calls. Now, historically, when there's roughly 100 million calls into the IRS every single year, the level of service is right around 30%. So you had a 1 in 3 chance, you had 3 in 10 chance of getting your call answered when you call in. When the call volume exploded to 282 million, the level of service dropped to under 12%, about 11.4%. So just over 1 in every 9 people calling the IRS in 2021 was able to talk to a live person. And we're going to see that level of service stay low throughout 2022. And frankly, who knows who knows how low it'll go, if it'll ever recover. I don't know that. The IRS tells us that they're going to hire a bunch of people. They've been trying to hire 5,000 new people to specifically help with the call volume and the mail volume that they're facing. But Merrill, they're so far behind, it's difficult to imagine how long it's going to take them to catch up.
Well, President Biden was trying to push through a lot more money for the IRS that I think he wasn't able to get through. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, you're exactly correct. That was the Build Back Better program that failed as of as of a couple of months ago. I think it was dead in January, Merrill, it seems like to me. Yeah. And so there was a provision in the Build Back Better plan for $80 billion to the IRS over 10 years. So $8 billion a year for 10 years. That would have effectively increased the IRS's budget to about $20 billion a year. Right now they're at about $13 billion. So even more than that, $21 billion a year. That failed, and it failed not because of the IRS part of it so much, although that was a big deal. There was an awful lot of people that were concerned about handing the IRS $80 billion in one swoop here. But there were all, and these reasons as well or better than I do as to why all the other reasons why it failed. But there was just a number of people in Washington that couldn't stomach $5 trillion more dollars in federal spending in one budget cycle here. So so the bottom line is the IRS didn't get that money, but they did get more money, Merrill. They did get more money in this last budget sequence. Not $80 billion, that's for sure, but they did get another $500 million or so, maybe $600 million. And so they're going to use that money. They say they're going to use that money to hire people to deal with the backlog. But again, who knows what happens? We'll just have to wait and see.
Our guest for this hour is Dan Pilla, tax expert extraordinaire, someone we always go to around tax time to find out what we need to know about the coming tax changes. If you'd like to call, if you have a question for Dan, 1-800-351-1212. 1-800-351-1212 to reach out through Point of View to Dan and ask your question. We also have information about Dan Pilla on our website. You can go to pointofview.net. We have ways to reach out to him, find his website, get his articles because he writes frequently for National Review. And these, Dan, I have to say, these are very insightful articles. You pull numbers out. I've been in the policy world for decades, and you pull numbers out and things out I just haven't even run across before because there's so much important information out there that you as taxpayers need to know, because if you get this wrong, the government may come after you. And right now, we're not entirely sure because the processing is slow. So, Dan, when we come back, I want you to talk a little bit about your third point in the National Review about the processing of tax returns, which are so far behind. If you want to talk to Dan, give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back on Point of View in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Kevin Williamson recently asked a good question. Are we at war? At first glance, the answer seems simple. The U.S. is not at war with Russia. We haven't declared war on Russia, even if we are indirectly involved in providing military hardware. But consider the fact that few Americans thought we were at war with radical Islam until the attack on 9/11. These radical Muslim leaders were at war with us, even as our leaders in the country dismiss some of the earlier attacks on our military. Kevin Williamson argues that the United States is a belligerent if Vladimir Putin says the United States is a belligerent. That is a sobering thought. Putin can make up a pretext to attack the U.S. or NATO and justify whatever action he feels is necessary. As I mentioned in a previous commentary, his next attack might be a cyber attack. The Biden administration apparently backed down from sending MiG-29 fighter jets from Poland to Ukraine because they would first be sent to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. They feared this might look like the U.S. and NATO were carrying out a military operation against Russian forces in Ukraine. Kevin Williamson said the MiG fiasco underlined the Biden administration's predictable fecklessness and disorganization. America needed a Keystone pipeline, but instead we got the Keystone Cops. The administration also hopes that fighting will stay in Ukraine, but it will only stay there if Putin believes that it is in his interest to keep it there and might move his troops to other countries rather than stay tied down in a quagmire in Ukraine. We may not think we're at war with Russia, but Vladimir Putin may not see it that way. We should be prepared. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And on the phone with me, tax expert Dan Pilla. And Dan, I'll tell you, I could use a little extra money in these high inflation times. I keep thinking maybe Joe Biden will help us out there. Joe seems to be blaming Vladimir Putin on this on the inflation. But if I could just get a tax refund back, that might help me, give me a little extra money to pay for some of these higher prices. But the IRS is having trouble getting these things through, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, what we're talking about is the processing problems here that they've been facing. The core function of the IRS, Merrill, is to collect taxes, and if you're going to collect taxes, you got to process the tax returns. You know, in 2021, the IRS received about 160 million individual tax returns, another 100 plus million business tax returns, and they are bogged down in processing these things. As of December 2021, now remember, we're in the midst of a new filing season here now. 2022 is another filing season. Our 2021 tax returns are going to be submitted over the next few months. The IRS is going to get another more than 230 or 260 million tax returns, Merrill, but they're already behind from last year, about 10 million business and individual tax returns that haven't been processed, another roughly 10 million amended personal and business tax returns that haven't been processed, and approximately 5 million unprocessed pieces of correspondence that have flowed into the IRS in 2021 and early part of 2022 that have not been processed. So, I just don't know how they're going to get through this filing season. Of course, the short answer is most of the returns are e-filed, but still, about 15% of the tax returns filed, Merrill, are not e-filed. They're paper filed, which means they have to be processed. The mail's got to be opened. The checks have to be cashed. The return has to be processed. And it's a monstrous job for them to do that.
So there's an IRS page that says, "Where's my refund?" I can I can go as an average American and click onto that and try to find out where my refund is.
Well, yeah, you can try it for sure. The hits to the IRS's website exceeded 2 billion in 2021. Now that's up almost 4 times since 2019, and the hits to the "Where's My Refund" page doubled about almost from approximately, well, not quite doubled, but from about 369 million to over 632 million hits in 2021 as to "Where's My Refund." The problem is it's pointed out by the National Taxpayer Advocate in her annual report to Congress, which is where these numbers come from, Merrill, from the National Taxpayer Advocate's report. She points out that the "Where's My Refund" page, for the most part, is non-functional for most people because it doesn't explain the status delays, what's going on. It doesn't explain the reason for the delay. It doesn't explain where the return is in the process of getting the processing that it needs, nor does it point out to the taxpayer what has to be done. So there's complete lack of clarity with this thing that doesn't help anybody get to the bottom line of what's going on with my refund. In the meantime, there's millions of people out there that are still waiting for their refunds.
We've got Susan on the line. Let's go and see if we can bring her up here real quickly. And Susan, you're on the air. She's from California.
Hello there.
Hello, Susan.
Hey, I did have a question, though. It's just for all this IRS processing thing. That is something that's been bothering me ever since the whole shutdown and not being able to get through to people. What happened to all the IRS employees? Were they put on admin leave, sitting at home twiddling their thumbs? The agency not to give them phones and computers to work from home?
Hold on, Susan. We'll get you an answer.
Yeah, that's a good question, Susan. Of course, just about everybody in the IRS went home for approximately 2 months in the middle of 2020. A great number of those folks are still at home. And yes, they are working from home. A great number of them are working from home. The auditors, for example, the appeals officers, the IRS attorneys, this body of folks that does the litigation work, these are the people that I'm interacting with all the time. Those folks are working from home. They've got the computer systems at home. They've got their phone systems linked up to the IRS's computer so they can function from home. You scan and email stuff to them to an e-server, and they seem to be able to get that information. But these folks that are taking phone calls, the 282 million calls, they're not working from home. The people that have to process the tax returns, Susan, they're not working from home. The IRS's workforce dropped over the last 10 years. There's no doubt about that. That was one of the things, Merrill, that was driving the push for the $800 billion that Biden was pushing for with his Build Back Better plan. Mm-hmm. They were talking about the workforce drop. The high water mark for the IRS's workforce was just north of 100,000 people, and that happened in the middle part of the first decade here of the 21st century. So about 2005, 2006, they were at their high water mark. By 2010, they were at roughly 100,000 employees, and today there are roughly 75,000 employees. Now, most of that is attrition, Merrill. People that are retiring, people that they just move on; they're just not there anymore. Of course, federal government never fires anybody, that. But so it wasn't that they cleaned house. That wasn't it. So there's no doubt that the workforce is down compared to what it was 20 years ago. And that was one of the arguments, one of the things that they professed to be doing with this $80 billion if they got it, which they didn't. And so there it is, Susan. The processing people were dragged back into the office in the latter part of 2021, but the damage was done by then, and now they're trying to dig out of it.
But Dan, the automation, and I understand the IRS automation is running way behind what the rest of the country is doing. But automation should have allowed them to be able to do a lot more with fewer people, even if maybe not as few as they have now. But the automation should have helped in that, shouldn't it?
Well, and I argue that it does help in that, Merrill. And as a matter of fact, I personally do not believe, I might be the only guy in the country that doesn't believe this, but I'm willing to stand alone here. I do not believe that the IRS is using antiquated computers. All right? Every time there's a problem with the agency, they blame, quote-unquote, antiquated computers. And, in fact, I had a phone conversation with a revenue officer. This is a tax collector, the guy that goes out and bangs on the door and wants you to write the check, in a client's case about 2 months ago, and he told me that the biggest part of the problem with the IRS right now is their 1960s computer technology. Well, that's nonsense, Merrill. It's absolute nonsense. In fact, I got an article on National Review from a couple of weeks ago that talks about the IRS's so-called antiquated computers. And I point out that of the 160 million individual income tax returns that will be filed this year, about 80% of those are going to be filed electronically. Now, Merrill, I don't know where you were in the 1960s, but I know one thing. There was no capacity to file a tax return through the electronic process in 1960. The IRS spends about $350 million every single year, year in and year out, and they've done it for 25 years on technology upgrades, maintenance of their system, buying new systems, and so on. And so, and as a matter of fact, in the article on National Review from a couple of weeks ago, I talk about the IRS's use of technology for facial recognition technology, Merrill, that they're trying to build into the system. Now, they're having a lot of pushback on that, but they are trying to get facial recognition software that they can use not just for identity verification, but for investigative purposes as well. Now, again, there was no such technology in the 1960s. So nobody's going to convince me that they're operating under with antiquated technology. I do not believe it, and I will not believe it.
And Dan, when we come back from the break, we're going to take a break here in a minute. I'd like you to highlight some of the key things people should be thinking about in the changes of the tax for I guess this past year, but what's different from say a previous year that might catch you, because there was child tax credit money, there was other money coming to people at a time where I think they were actually obligated to pay taxes on some of that, maybe not some other things. So give some thought to what are the key changes people need to sort of flag in their mind when they're filling out their tax reform now. And I'd also like to ask you about, has the culture of the IRS changed a little bit? We had Lois Lerner, I think it was, a few years ago, ended up stepping down from the IRS with her full tax, or full retirement benefits, even though she was retiring, she was going after conservative groups and keeping them from getting their, I think they were looking for 501c4 designations, but she was putting them on hold and going and investigating them just because they were conservative groups. So keep that in mind. We'll come back with Dan in just a few minutes. If you want to know more about Dan, we've got that available at pointofview.net. You can go to pointofview.net, find out how to reach out to him, find out how to find his articles, and I'd suggest you do that. We've got his latest article in National Review on some of these problems facing the IRS. That's available on pointofview.net, and you can find out more about his background and what he's able to do, so maybe you can reach out to him if you need help with your taxes. Stay with us. Point of View is going to be back in just a minute.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And we're back on Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and on the phone with me, tax expert Dan Pilla. And Dan, before we get to the questions I was asking you, let's take a quick one from Elmer in Alaska, who's got a question about the staffing of the IRS, and that was something we were talking about. Elmer, you're on the air.
Hi. I would also ask, so what was the population? I was told that, or saw that the staffing is about the level of 1970, and you kind of talked about staffing. So I was wondering, like, what the population was in 1970 relative to today, and then as far as the budgeting, what was the budgeting in 1970 relative to today, and to see if the IRS is and who was in charge of denying the IRS the funds that resulted in this level of technology and staffing.
It's a good question, Elmer. Dan, go ahead.
Well, yeah, Merrill, I can't honestly answer the question because I don't know what the IRS's staffing was in 1970. I don't know what the level of return filing was in 1970. I started paying attention to this stuff in about 1980 and started really paying attention to the policy issues in about 1990. My book, How to Fire the IRS, Merrill, came out in 1992 or 93. It's out of print now, but that was the book that started my work on tax policy as opposed to just tax litigation and helping folks with their problems. I don't know if it's true that the ratio of IRS employees compared to the overall population of the United States is at 1970 levels. I don't know if that's true or not, but getting back to the point I made to Susan earlier, there is no way, absolutely no way, the level of technology that the IRS has is at 1970s level. So they're doing much, much more work with fewer people because of technology if we don't look at anything other than the return processing part of it. And again, to throw these numbers out there, in this filing season, 2022, there will be about 160 million individual income tax returns filed. There'll be another roughly 105 million business tax returns filed. About 80% of those returns, maybe a little north of 80%, are going to be filed electronically and processed electronically. They don't need people keep punching those returns into the computers anymore like they did in the old days. So they don't need that huge, many thousands of workers working in these massive computer centers punching tax return data into the computer by hand. Those days are gone. Now, certainly there are still returns that are filed on paper that have to be manually processed, but it's not anything like it was in the old days. Now, the other thing that we have to add to this is the number of information returns that are filed with the IRS every year. These are W-2s, 1099s, all of the reports that third parties make. There's going to be about 1.3, no, but it's more, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. There's going to be 3.4 billion information returns filed with the IRS, W-2s, 1099s. All of that stuff is filed, well, not all of it, but probably 95% of that stuff is filed electronically, and all of that stuff is processed electronically. So a great number of the things that the IRS does these days are automated with modern computer technology, not 1960s or 1970s computer technology.
1-800-351-1212 if you'd like to ask Dan a question, 1-800-351-1212. But Dan, going on with Elmer's comment there, it's an interesting point because the population grows, you've got more returns coming in and so forth, but the tax code is also significantly more complicated, which makes sort of comparison somewhat difficult, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and in fact, you make a great point, Merrill, and I wish I had thought of it. That's probably the single biggest difference between what went on in 1970, what's going on today is the complexity of the tax code. Now, again, I don't know what size the Internal Revenue Code was in 1970, but I do know how large the tax code was in the year 2000. The tax code in the year 2000 consisted of about 1.5 million words. Today, the tax code is more than 4 million words, and it was changed more than 5,900 times just since 2001 alone, and that doesn't even include, Merrill, all the changes that took place in 2000 and 2001 with the various COVID legislation that was passed. It is tax code complexity that causes the single biggest problem for IRS in administering the system and for Jane and Joe taxpayer in complying with the system. The single greatest achievement we could make in reducing reducing the burden for everybody is true, honest-to-goodness tax law simplification, but they will not do that, Merrill. They know that's the problem. I'm talking about Congress now. Congress knows that's the problem, and they simply refuse to do anything about it.
Well, it sounds like the tax law growth is the worst type of inflation that we've got right now. So
it might be. It might be.
Give us a quick take on what are some of the key changes between the last year's filing, the previous years, and for 2021.
Well, in previous years, unemployment compensation was completely taxable. And so people were blindsided by that to a great extent, and would have been blindsided by that last year, except for another one of these law changes, Merrill, last-minute law changes that occurred in March of 2021 that made unemployment compensation non-taxable to a certain extent. So right now, right now, any unemployment compensation up to $10,400 per person is not considered taxable income. So that's going to be helpful to folks that received a lot of unemployment compensation in 2021. The other thing you need to pay attention to, and you got to sit down with your tax preparer and discuss this, and that is the tax credits. Now, whether it's the economic impact tax credit, the so-called stimulus, that was a prepaid tax credit that is non-taxable, did not affect your income, your tax liability in any way. It was just a free government giveaway is what it was, Merrill. That is, if you didn't get your check in the mail, this is what I'm trying to get to. If you didn't get your check in the mail, there's a line on the tax return that allows you to claim the tax credit on the return. This is the economic impact credit now. All right, so even if you didn't get your check in the mail, you're still going to get the benefit of that credit by claiming it on the tax return. So pay attention to that. You should have gotten a statement from the IRS that tells you how much of a check you received, and you're going to compare that with the amount of money that you were entitled to receive, and the difference, if you got less than you were entitled to, that goes on the tax return as an additional credit. And a credit is different from a deduction, Merrill, as you know. The deduction reduces your tax liability on a marginal scale. Mm-hmm. The credit reduces your tax liability dollar for dollar. So if you got a $2,000 credit, you got a $2,000 tax reduction. So it's important to take advantage of your credits.
Let's go to Richard in South Carolina because he has a question about the stimulus check. Richard, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I filed my taxes already, and we should have received and got my refund, and we should have received $5,500 and some change, and we got $1,200. And if you added it up, as I did on paper, they took back all three stimulus checks, $4,200.
Well, yeah, and I can't explain why they might have done that. There's a number of reasons why they might have done it. The first thing that would occur to me, of course, is your adjusted gross income. The stimulus is phased out, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, Richard, so I can't tell you exactly where the phase-outs were. But if your adjusted gross income is over a certain amount, I believe it was 120 for. I won't even give you the numbers. You can look them up easy enough on the IRS's website. But the point is that if your adjusted gross income is over certain amounts, then those credits are phased out. The economic impact stimulus payment was phased out and then eliminated at a certain point. So that would be one thing. The other thing is that maybe there was a double claim on the tax return, and I would not have no way to know this without looking at it. But if you actually got the check and then claimed the credit besides, then that would be a double dip, and they would adjust based on that.
I got you. Okay, well, I'll talk to my tax preparer. I'm not through yet. I just feel like Trump gave it to me and Biden took it away.
Well, and here's the other thing that's very possible, Richard. They could be just simply wrong. You know, their notices and their calculations are wrong more than half the time. So you got to sit down and comb through them carefully. And if they are mistaken, you have to challenge it. You got to push back, demand your money back, and then there's an appeals procedure that you can follow if they're not giving you the money.
Good deal. Thank you, sir. That was my question.
All right, you're welcome.
It's a good point, Dan, because if I remember right, people who call into the IRS and actually do get somebody on the line, they frequently get bad advice from the IRS when they're asking questions, don't they?
Yeah, there's a number of studies that have been done by the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration on the accuracy of the information the IRS gives out. And, depending on what year we're talking about, the ranges, they're wrong between 50% of the time to 30% of the time, depending on the questions and depending on the place and depending on the type of assister that you're talking to, whether it's a highly trained person or a person who's not so well trained. So they're all over the lot with the accuracy rates also.
Stay with us, Dan. We'll be back with our final segment with Dan Pilla in just a minute.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212 if you want to talk to tax expert Dan Pilla in our final segment. And I'm going to go to Anita in California because she has a question I think a lot of people have. Anita, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm calling today because I'm retired and I do my own taxes, so I don't have to pay $300 or $350 to get my taxes done. But I don't know how to do it on computer, and I don't want to learn because I don't have a computer. I don't have good signal where I'm at. And so why can't I do it online and they can't get to it on time?
Well, first of all, Anita, if you're not preparing your tax return through some kind of a software program, you're not going to be able to e-file it. The IRS
I don't want to e-file it.
Okay, well,
I don't
in
want
your
an
case,
e-file. I do it by, I usually pay. So they get my check. It's not a problem that they're not getting paid at this point. At some point, I probably won't get anything back, so I don't care. But the thing is, I feel like, if I'm a taxpayer and I'm paying the money I owe, they should be able to process it. And I understand part of it's COVID, but I think part of it is at one point Kirby hit on that there was a bunch of IRS workers who get paid time to do volunteer work. And so they may be doing volunteer work instead of doing our IRS paperwork. And I think if they're caught up, that's fine. And they want to take time to do it. But I don't think I should pay for it.
Okay, hold on, Anita. We'll get the answer.
Well, Anita, that's quite a event, and I'm with you there for sure. Of course, I don't have any way to know, what ratio of IRS employees is doing volunteer work in their spare time, but we do know they're not caught up with their work. And you're exactly correct that as a taxpayer, as a citizen, you are entitled to a functional tax collection agency. That's one of the 10 rights that you have, the 10 essential rights you have as a taxpayer, is the right to a system that works properly and functions the way it's supposed to. And we don't have that right now, and there's no question about it. And it's partly COVID. COVID had played a huge role in it. There's no question about that, but there are other factors as well. And one of the other factors, I think probably one of the leading factors, second only to the complexity of the tax code that we talked about before the break, is what we call mission creep. Every single year, the IRS, it seems like Congress gives the IRS a new job, another function that it's supposed to perform. For example, the IRS was responsible for enforcing the Obamacare rules that were passed in 2010. The IRS was responsible for administering all of that. And now we got the economic impact payments. That was, frankly, a free gift from our Santa Claus government that the IRS was responsible for administering. And now we've got the extra, or what's called the additional child credit that's written into the tax code. Anita, that's a welfare program that's administered by the Internal Revenue Service through the tax code. This is mission creep. In other words, it's beyond the scope of administering the federal income tax laws for the purposes of collecting revenue. You would think that the Internal Revenue Service's only job would be to go out and get the money. But in fact, that's not their only job. It's one of many, many jobs, and the list of jobs keeps growing. That is probably the second biggest cause of the logjam we have with the IRS right now, is they're asked to do too many different things that don't have anything to do with their core function of collecting taxes.
So, Dan, what do we need to do to get the IRS well, maybe we can't get it fixed, but to at least improve it? What would be your top 3 or 4 things that you would do if you had the ability?
Well, I'll tell you, Merrill, you're asking the wrong guy that question, because I'll tell you what I would do is I'd bulldoze the entire system and start over again. I do not believe that we can fix this system. I do not believe that the Internal Revenue Code can be made to be fair and efficient the way it needs to be to eliminate all these various problems. We have got to abolish the income tax, the Internal Revenue Service, and adopt an alternative tax system that does not involve every American reporting to the government on every aspect of their private lives. In my opinion, the solution is a national retail sales tax assessed on all consumption goods and services at the point of purchase, Merrill, collected by merchants, paid to the states, piggyback with their own state sales tax, and then the states are responsible to send it to the federal government. That is the only way to abolish this mess that we have called the Internal Revenue Code.
I think I asked the right person that question, but in our closing segment, let me try to get Vincent on from California. Vincent, you're on the air.
Hello.
Vincent?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about my taxes. I still haven't got them from 2020.
You still haven't got your refund or what?
My refund.
Yes.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten your refund from 2020, Vincent, I want you to go onto the IRS's website. At the bottom of the home page, this is irs.gov is their site. At the bottom of the home page is a link for the taxpayer advocate. Click that link and you'll be taken to a map of the United States. You click on your state, and it'll give you the contact. It'll give you the contact information for the Taxpayer Advocate's Office.
I am illiterate. That's why I paid somebody to do my taxes for me.
All right. Well, then sit down with your tax preparer, and the tax preparer will have a computer, and the tax preparer will be able to get to the taxpayer advocate's office in your area. That's where you need to go to raise the question and get some help.
Thank you, Vincent.
At the bottom. I'll tell her. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vincent. So, Dan, are we going to have is there any chance we're going to get even some tax reform? I still think the 2017 tax reform was good. It's not exactly where you wanted to go, but I thought it was better than what we had. But any chance we're going to get some kind of changes here?
Well, we're certainly not going to get the kind of changes that I'm looking for. And I tend to agree with you, Merrill, that the 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a good bill. In fact, I've got an article on National Review that fact checks the president's BS claims about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Mm-hmm. And so that is a very good read for anybody that thinks that Trump's tax laws were nothing but tax cuts for the rich. It's absolutely not true. The empirical data absolutely establishes that the lowest 80% of income earners got a tax cut under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and it was only the top 1% that had their income taxes increased under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So from a tax cut standpoint, Merrill, you're right. The bill was good. It was a step in the right direction. From a simplification issue, it really didn't do much for simplification at all.
All right. Dan, take about 30, 45 seconds and talk about how people can reach out to you, where they can find your articles. You've got a book for small businesses on tax issues.
Yeah, my book, Dan Pilla's Small Business Tax Guide, is my new book. Anybody that operates a small business out there must have this book. The IRS is gunning for small business owners in a big way. That is the next wave of tax audits that they have announced and that they are unleashing against Americans. So if you don't have this book, you're at risk. You need to get the book, Dan Pilla's Small Business Tax Guide. The books are available on my website, Merrill, which is my site is linked to Point of View, is it not?
It is, yes.
Yeah, so just go to the Point of View website. You'll get a link to my site there. You buy any one of my books at any price point, and you'll get a free 15-minute consultation directly with me. And then my articles are available on National Review, which is also linked to the Point of View website. So go to Point of View and get the links there, and there's a whole list of my different articles that are published on National Review.
Thank you, Dan, for joining us. You're always the tax expert we like to go to.
My pleasure, Merrill. Thanks for having me.
Well, we had a number of a lot of information coming today, both with Dr. Mitri Raheb and Dan Pilla. So two different things. You can go to Point of View and find out information about both of those, and I'd encourage you to do so. Thank you for joining us. Had a number of interesting calls on this last program also. So thank you for joining us. This is Merrill Matthews sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. Thank you for joining us on Point of View.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas recently said, "The Declaration of Independence has weathered every storm for 245 years. It birthed a great nation. It abolished the sin of slavery, and it endeavored to address its effects. While we have failed the Declaration time and again, and the ideals of the Declaration time and again, I know of no time," said Thomas, "when the ideals have failed us." While some see our founding as fatally flawed and promote ideas that have failed every time they've been tried, at Point of View, like Justice Thomas, we still believe in America's ideals. And if you do too, make a difference today. Join the Truth Team as we promote the unchanging truth that gave us liberty and prosperity. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. The original Americans responded to the call. Will you? Pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.